over there. Come on, get it in chat. I hired $20 on Fiverr.com. Okay, so we're just gonna start right away. One take. That first shot was one take.
Yep.
We have a studio audience here. We got my mic here. Definitely in use. Definitely not just using an iPhone camera and mic. You don't, well, I might move it to you, but for the most part, people just want to hear me. People just mostly want to hear me. Like, maybe I'll move it over to the This is going to be a TV series. I know, I can hear you guys booing. It has a good theme song. I've mentioned it before in one of my earlier videos. So it's called Neon Genesis Evangelion. You can see it on screen.
I think it's Evangelion.
Evangelion.
I think it's
Evangelion. I mean, I don't think it's a word. I don't think that's a real word. I'll put it. I of course have a lot of notes. Like usual. She's not as prepared. This might be a rough one. We might be in for a rough, unpaired entry to the Chatmonster catalog. So, Thea. Yeah. Let's just go with.
Let's get into it, man. Y'all
let's just jump right into it. What were your first thoughts? I guess that's my first question.
Okay, well, my first impressions. I haven't watched a lot of anime before. 2 other shows, if you count Avatar. Most people don't, I guess.
I don't.
So you started watching it before me, and you were telling me all about it, and I was like, oh, stupid show, whatever, I don't care.
No, you weren't. You were intrigued.
Started watching it, and initially that's basically all it was. Pretty formulaic stuff with like pretty much every single show is just, well, Shinji's just a rat when we first meet him.
That's not formulaic. He's an interesting character.
Yeah, you said you hated Shinji, first of all.
Well, I do hate him, but he's an interesting character.
I like Shinji. You know, call to action or whatever, he gets on the show, and then gets into Eva, and then Angel shows up, and then they beat him, like, oh, we can't beat him, but then they magically beat him.
No, it's not that simple.
I mean, every single episode for like a while was like that.
There's like no action. Like, there's barely any action. Alright, first of all, let's put a spoiler alert, because we're probably gonna spoil something from it. I'm not gonna I'm gonna try as hard as I can, but like, there will be spoilers in some capacity.
I mean, the show's from like 20 years ago.
I was just reading that notification on my camera, on my industry standard camera. The show is formulaic when you first get into it. The show shifts a lot, which I think is the most interesting part of it, coming from, and I'm not a TV head, like I don't really watch TV. I basically just listen to music. I don't really watch that much TV.
You just stare at a wall and listen to the Smiths.
Yeah.
Shift?
Because like a Saturday morning cartoon in the beginning, like they you know, Shinji comes in, then they solve the fight. There's different dynamics that go into each episode. Like the first fight he loses, and then he has all this, inner turmoil, and he has daddy issues. There's a lot of conflict that comes together in every episode. It shifts because some episodes there won't be a fight, or some episodes will just go into one of those like psychedelic, going into his mind and like what he thinks and what like her name Ray thinks or things like that. And then the last couple of episodes is obviously like completely changes, and it's just unique and interesting ending that I was a huge fan of. But also mixing cartoon.
I thought.
Well, how do they bring like the dramatics and the different conflicts into the episode and into the formula?
I think it was pretty well done. Pretty much since the beginning, like there was like a few just like nuggets of like suspense. Like, do you remember when Miss Misato where she destroys another? I think it wasn't Americas or something.
Yeah, it was like it was like German.
They have like a robot Eva that's not piloted or anything, and it goes berserk, and she destroys it. But then her coworker, is the right word coworker? I don't remember her name.
Colleague.
Her colleague, it like looks at her the blonde girl.
I don't remember her name.
Mommy issues. Miss Misato slaps her like 4 times because she just says awful stuff.
Yes, because she's like a scientist. That's why you don't go to school to be a science major.
You become an asshole.
Exactly. Okay. If you become a scientist.
But that was like the first...
Yeah, there's just so much that goes on in every that just develops a character.
That was just the first thing that hinted to me like there was a bigger endgame sort of thing going on. It wasn't just like a little action cartoon.
Kyoji. I just like can't
Kyoji.
remember like Japanese names, even if I
honestly,
like know them.
that's my biggest complaint is I just don't remember names like at all. And I'm also illiterate.
Is his name Kyoji? The guy, the pony, the guy, you know, like the double
guy with the
agent.
glasses.
Like it's just so
that guy.
it's so complicated because like he's a double agent, but then he's like figuring out that there's like someone pulling the strings, and it's like this other company actually just belongs to Nerve or like Seal or whatever.
Well,
There's like
Seal owns Nerve.
yeah, Kyoji or the ponytail double agent guys is an interesting character. He's kind of like an asshole, and like another problem. Yeah, another problem that comes in is like the sexualization of like the little girls, which is just like
she's
anime
like,
stuff. So like it's just bad. It's just like why?
Wait, let's like narrow this down. What did you like about the show? Like a couple of key things that you liked about it. What are the things you liked about it?
That it shifted and that it was, you never really understand it, like at all. Like you never understand like the seal and what the experimentation and what really Ray is. Also, I like that the characters are sometimes simple, like the main sort of antagonist, the father. And
he's complicated though.
He's kind of simple because like you always know that he's bad. You always know that he's sort of... He's complicated in that he's undermining Seal, and he's also just like a terrible father, and like sort of manipulated his way to the top. But you always know he's bad. It's never like a question.
Well, it's just what made him interesting was his motivations, and what makes him like slightly not a bad guy, because everything he does beforehand is total like he's a terrible person or whatever. But then you find out that he was just trying to be with his wife again, with what Seal's experimentation was. He was, like, taking advantage of Ray. That's what he was trying to do all along. And then Ray was like, fuck that, I'm gonna go save the world. Become monster.
But it just doesn't... Like, like, there wasn't enough connection to Yui, or, like, the wife that died.
I didn't even know what her name was.
Like, there just wasn't that much of it in it. There was the one episode near the end, which I think could even be the best episode, where they did the flashback where you learned about Professor Fuyutsuki or whatever, his secondhand man, and you learn about Yui and like Gendo and like how they meet and like how
you don't really get like how he rose to power and became like the most powerful.
You really find out a lot about them, even though like it's already almost the end of the show, and you like this secondhand man guy has like he does nothing the whole show, and then it's like, oh, he's kind of like important.
So wait, do you like it or not?
I like that it's confusing. I like that it makes you think, but I like that it has the guise of the Saturday morning cartoon. Like, but every fight though is interesting because there isn't really that much action. They just kind of like figure out this, you know, the Star Trek thing, or like they mention sometimes they'll mention something and then they'll like, you know, like some way to include it into the fight or whatever. Like when they made that gun and they routed all the power from Tokyo, the infinite different lines of conflict between Seal and Misato and the double agent Gendo and Ray and and you're just kind of like Shinji. You don't really know what's going on, which is interesting. What did you think about like the deep psychological?
Are you gonna ask me what I like about the show?
Oh yeah, what do you like about the show?
I'm always a character guy. Like the plot can be total shit, but as long as the characters are enjoyable in some way or another, I love it. When they introduced like Asuka was like a great thing. Like,
but you hated her.
No, but I love the dynamic that she created.
Yeah.
You know, because, you know, you love to hate her sort of thing.
I liked her. I thought she was just funny, just toxic.
I liked her. It's just like, you know, you kind of enjoy watching a toxic person. Like, people love getting angry, you know?
Yeah,
and just,
me
like,
included.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
but
Asuka is probably the most what I can relate to because I'm just a toxic person.
I wish they expanded on more was Shinji and Rei's like relationship, because like before Asuka was there was like one episode where they like had a fight together.
Toxic
and Shinji was
person.
like you matter to me or whatever, and Rei's like, what?
Which is kind of interesting.
But like I said, I'm a character guy, so like when I saw that they had that character bond for one episode, I was really excited to see where they would go with it, and then it kind of just disappeared once Asuka showed up. But I also love Miss Misato, and like, there's almost like two storylines almost going on with like the adults and then like the kids.
Yeah, like, which is an interesting.
Yeah. Like Miss Misato, like she always carries herself like she understands everything that's going on, and like she's really on top of it. She's just
cool.
Like a 25-year-old person in like a military base. Like,
yeah, she's just
like,
true.
But then she's like super damaged because of her father, and like
they do bring that in well.
Yeah, it just makes sense. Like it makes sense for her character to have like a sort of like two sides to her.
Yeah, she's very troubled, and like I think they pull it off without making it too like, you know, she has like a breakdown episode. Where they don't like make
it's
it
always
like
there.
It's gradually. It's not just like,
It do not matter.
The way that Miss Misato like really cares for Shinji. Like,
Yeah.
I want to say family bond, but then she.
But Shinji's
kisses
kind of
him
an
at
ass,
the end.
because it was like, oh, he's already in the human. Whoa.
Yeah.
Like,
But they created like a cool like relationship between them, at least before all
Yeah.
that stupid stuff happened. And like, cause like initially Miss Misato was like, oh, you don't want to pilot Eva, whatever. Like,
It do not matter.
I'm not gonna stop you if you can't handle it. We'll get
Yeah.
someone else. But then, like, as time goes on, she understands, like, how to talk to Shinji. And,
but she's
like,
actually not that like she's not very empathetic in the beginning.
She's not, because she
Yeah.
doesn't know him. She just is...
You think you know me?
And how much it changed from episode to episode, from like
Yeah.
the formula to like weird psychological stuff to like backstory. It just shifts a lot. So if you're
Yeah.
looking, and it's not a long series, so if you're looking for something like that, it could be interesting. We've covered like the basis of the show without revealing too much.
Well, can I talk about, like, my biggest problem, I think,
Yeah.
with it?
Yeah.
I think my biggest problem is that they're really unable to balance everything that they want to do. Because, like, there's, like, a really deep lore with this show that they never really talked about, and we had to watch, like, a video about it to,
Yeah.
like, figure out what was going on.
Well, no, that's what I'm gonna
And,
get
like,
into.
Okay. But just, like, because there's such a deep lore and there's so much, like, action and, like, different character interactions and, like, conflict, and you don't really know what's going on top of them trying to reveal all of these, like, psychological problems that pretty much every single character has. Like, every single
Yeah.
character has a problem.
You think you know me?
Trying to mesh those all together, it gets really clumsy at a
It
certain
does,
point.
but like I think that's just part of it. I think that's part of the charm. I don't think
Part of the
that's
charm.
I don't see it as too much of an issue because it's just like going into the philosophical, like psychological message that's at the center of the show in some ways comes about like kind of randomly, like, but like it kind of just comes up and it just becomes the close of the show, like the last 3 or 4 episodes. So like, what did you think about that shift, and what did you think about like how they pulled off the psychological problems and the AT field and just like the main meat of what is the ending movie in the last 3 episodes?
I never understood when they were in, like, and then they introduced, like, this random thing at the end where they're trying to combine, and then it was, like, that was, like,
AT
revealed.
field.
What was, like, the last, like, 4 episodes?
I think that was just in the movie. I don't think they'd said what an AT field was until the movie.
Yeah, they just, he tore through it,
It do not-
and, like, I don't know what it is, you know?
like, you don't really have to know that to get the philosophical element.
Yeah, the
of the
psychological, that's
show.
just them.
Yeah, like
It
that's
makes
like at
sense.
the heart of the characters, and that's like what it becomes most important. Shinji. But anyways, I'm not even gonna talk about that. One interesting thing they brought into the whole AT field and people pushing each other away, and that's the main conflict between
That's the
Shinji and
AT
Asuka,
fields.
which like kind of drives the show forward near the end, and the sort of that all these life forms are all connected, all these people. They do the villain's perspective really well. You can see like, oh, like you will bring all these life forms together and make the instrumentality project. It's not that bad, but it is because it just kills everyone. But it's bringing everyone back to like Pangea, back to like, you know how God. There's that whole element. I think that's pulled off well, especially the art and how everything. Yeah, it looked amazing. I mean, yeah, throughout the show, like let's not you don't even have to. Yeah, you don't even have to say anything. It's
Don't even
basically
get
the
me
art
started.
of the show is just amazing.
Yeah.
But the characters' conflicts with each other make a lot of sense. They're relatively simple relationships that each character has to each other. They all make more sense and bring in this sci-fi aspect that's really interesting. I just think it's like a really interesting close to what you might think would just be a big battle and then the good guys win and then it's over. I think it.
Yeah, it ended up being Shinji's decision what he wanted to do. It didn't have a lot of like the cheesy like boing, like.
It's not long either. Like it's
And I mean,
really
the theme
not.
just watching the theme song.
Yeah, the theme song
every
is
20
like
minutes
yeah.
as it keeps going. It honestly just makes it worth it.
Yeah, the theme song is like the best theme song.
We'll
of
finish an
any
episode.
show.
I'll just sit there like, "Buh," and then, but then the theme song comes on, and I just forget
it's
it. I
like
don't even care anymore.
but I think it really gives an interesting message about the human condition. But also, I forgot one last interesting thing is when they bring in the real life pictures and like the empty movie theater and stuff.
Ooh,
it's
that
like,
was crazy.
It brings in the audience without being too preachy, corny. It's like, why are you trying to connect with these characters with these stories? It's kind of like the instrument, like it's like it's like the show is the human instrumentality project, or like watching any entertainment or anything else that a human has created is kind of like trying to connect to it, and for what?
Even though you truly
Like, you
never
can't.
can. Watching
I would
anything without kind of
100%
spoil it.
recommend it.
Uh-huh.
I would recommend it. It's the only anime I've watched that like really I liked, because it was like a move. It was like,
Well, to be fair, you haven't watched a lot of anime.
yeah, but
I
I've
think
tried
you would like
to.
Avatar. You should watch
Yeah,
it.
but I'm not watching that because that's corny. It's not real.
Then jump on the bandwagon, man.
But
Well, I give it
thi-
like an 8.
I mean,
I give it like an 8 out of 10.
oh my god, an Alien 8.
What do you mean? Okay, normally this kind of
Dude.
show wouldn't be for me. I don't like how violent it is. I would cover my eyes pretty often.
You did?
I did.
It's
you
not
just,
that
you
violent.
just didn't pay attention to me. Like, some bits were kind of gross, and I'm not a super fan of like just like really action-centered shows. I think it's an action show
Not that much.
in general, but I still enjoyed it, so that's why I give it an 8.
I give it a 9.
I think someone with taste like me.
I just really enjoyed it. I think it said
The only
it had a
anime I
really
watch is
great
Oran Host Club.
philosophical closing. It's a lot to think about, a lot to chow down on. It might have been more interesting if I didn't watch a video
Yeah.
explaining it. Actually, no, I would never have gotten it if I didn't watch the video.
No,
'Cause
definitely
you'd have to
we
just
would've
like
had to watch it
you'd
again.
have to just watch like certain episodes over and over.
But in a way, it's also fun.
It is poetic. Yeah,
It's
it is poetic in structure, and I think that's probably one of the biggest
And whether
reasons why I
someone
like it.
enjoys trying to figure out stuff like that, you know, it's
But there's
definitely a
also
good
just
show.
good characters that you can understand and relate to.
Yeah,
So it has
that's
everything.
why I like
It has everything. It's 9 out of 10 for me. Alright,